questions about meditation practice before I get into tonight's Dharma talk? Sure, John.
When you talk about present time awareness, I'm questioning the authenticity about a conditioned mind. I wonder, does conditioned mind is able to fade away in present time awareness?
What do you mean by conditioned mind? I mean, so let me ask you the answer and then tell me if, what do you think? What I think is that actually present time awareness is aware of the conditioned mind. And its goal isn't really to have the conditioned mind fade away, but there's some part of our mind that is conditioned, but also there's some unconditional awareness, consciousness that is aware. It's meta-awareness, that which is aware of what's happening in the conditioned mind. Now, part of liberation, part of enlightenment, one of the ways that it is defined is that you've woken up to the unconditioned. It's one of the classic definitions of nirvana, the unconditioned. Mostly in mindfulness, we're observing what's happening right now. We're observing, we're receiving, we're paying attention, all of these awareness, consciousness, present time awareness of the conditioned body, the conditioned perceptions of pleasant, unpleasant, neutral, the conditioned thought patterns and emotions. We're aware of the conditions. Now, there's the mind that is conditioned and has all of the memories and habits and personality, all of that stuff. But the core condition is everything's impermanent. And you see that. You're paying attention. You say, okay, this thought arises and it passes. This sensation arises and it passes, changes, this emotion. The condition is change.
This is why, you see, I believe the conditioned mind is the sum total of a stored memory.
Yes.
Of all the senses.
Okay.
I was paying attention just now, trying to stop the chatter.
Yeah.
Become present.
Yeah.
You say, let go of the past or the future.
Yeah.
Now I'm present.
Yeah.
And I began to observe the present moment, issue that is confronting me. And I honestly felt I'm still lying to myself.
About?
The issue that I'm confronting with.
Your mind is...
Still, you talk about awareness, presence.
Yeah.
If the whole teaching of this is present time awareness.
But this is, I don't know if I'm catching it right, but I feel like this is a huge insight. When you can turn towards your mind and see, my mind is full of shit.
Totally.
Like you said, I turned towards my mind and it was still lying to me.
Totally.
It was still telling me I'm right, they're wrong, whatever it was saying. I was seeing a kind of ignorant conditioning in my mind.
Not only that, your guided meditation, if you are coming from your own agenda,
yeah, sure.
so you are conditioning me more.
I am.
So then you have power over me.
Yes, I've been hypnotizing you in particular for years. It's a long con. Subliminally, more donations.
But the gift of this work is liberation.
Yeah.
Does that really exist?
It's a good question. You know that I'm a little bit agnostic about what liberation is, if it exists, if there is such thing as a fully liberated being. If so, how come they're hard to find? How come in the Buddhist stories, they're like, people are getting liberated left and right? And how come these days we know the folks that have been meditating for 50, 60, 70 years and they don't seem to be fully liberated yet?
So maybe everybody's lying to each other?
Maybe. I'm open to that. I am open to that. But this thing about I'm conditioning you, we're all trying to, it's called a training. Right? Training and conditioning are somewhat synonymous. The Buddha says the untrained mind, suffering for sure. If you don't condition your mind to see clearly, to have some wisdom, some compassion, suffering for sure. If you try to condition your mind to see the truth of impermanence, how so much of this isn't personal, how your mind is confused. You're sitting here and you're like, I know this isn't true, but my mind keeps telling me this story over and over that I don't actually believe anymore, but it doesn't stop the conditioned mind from telling its stories. I love this line in the early suttas where the Buddha says, the untrained worldling, that, those who have not trained, who have not conditioned their minds, go around annoying each other with their views and opinions. I love that line. You haven't even really checked out your own mind very clearly, but you have a lot of views and opinions that you believe.
Your teacher, Ajahn Chah, listening to his tape.
Yeah.
Is he that evolved?
I never met Ajahn Chah, so I can't say from direct experience. He's my teacher's teacher. And hard to say. I mean, his teachings are right on. His books are right on. People that spent time with him really respected him. And they used to catch him smoking cigarettes sometimes in the bushes, which gives me more respect for him.
Thank you.
Didn't you say that the unconditioned mind is the nirvana?
That's the classic definition.
I don't get it, because you just said that the conditioned mind, it kind of seems to be a contradiction.
Not that nirvana is the unconditioned, which then understands that the mind is conditioned and doesn't take it as self anymore, doesn't take it personal, doesn't believe the ignorant patterns and tendencies of the mind. I don't think that nirvana, that enlightenment, perfects the human mind. I think it perfects our perspective on our mind, our relationship to our mind. Many of you have heard me go on and on about this for years, about the Buddha says, I'm fully enlightened, the unconditioned, I'm not suffering anymore, full compassion for all pain, non-attached appreciation for all of the pleasant experiences. I understand that there's not a solid, separate, continuous self, but Mara, difficult emotions, continue. The conditioned mind continues to lust and fear and lie to us. Fully enlightened Buddha, Mara still is coming and saying, you'd be happier if you were getting laid right now. He doesn't believe it anymore, but his mind doesn't stop saying it. The conditioned mind continues. The unconditioned is that awareness that holds it all and says, I've seen through these lies, these delusions, these confusions, this fear-based, self-centered human tendency. I'm not suffering about it anymore, but it hasn't completely gone away. The unconditioned that receives that conditioned mind patterning, difficult, afflictive emotions continue for the enlightened being, I think. But it's, it gets to be conjecture, and because I don't know, I'm not there, and it's hard to find anybody that is there, and so it becomes philosophy rather than direct experience. Okay, let me jump into my topic for tonight. You can, go ahead.
No, this teaches really quick point, the line about mind crushes mind. Is that kind of what you're talking about, like when the mind steps back and see, oh, there's my conditioned mind going again, or do you think it's different?
Ashley is asking this question. There's this phrase in the early teachings, some of the meditation instructions. It's one of the phrases about effort, about how much effort we should put into training our mind. And there's like these different efforts. One time it says, if a unwholesome, unskillful thought arises, just let it go. Let it arise and pass. Don't take it personal, or replace it. Bring in a positive thought. If you're really in a resentment, bring in compassion, bring in forgiveness. It says if you can't do any of that, then mind crushes mind. Where there's this like very aggressive instruction that says, just as a strong person would take a weaker person and take them by the shoulders and throw them to the ground with tongue pressed against the roof of the mouth and jaw clenched, expel that thought, crush that thought with your own mind. Kick that unwholesome thought the fuck out. Crush it. Now, it sounds like suppression. So it's not something that we talk about that much. Mostly we're just like, let it go, let it come, let it arise and pass. Don't take it personal. The way that I've come to understand that instruction is that it's also the last effort, and it's kind of last ditch effort. If you're so enraged that you're about to become violent and you can't let it go, suppress it. Crush that violence. If you're about to act, it's not just a difficult feeling in meditation, but you're about to do something that's going to create negative karma for you. You're about to hurt someone. Then throw that thought, sit on your hands, crush your mind with your mind. Do not allow yourself to relapse. And that with training, you'll get to the point where your mind is saying, get loaded, fight, steal, some really negative advice from your mind. And you'll get to the point where you just say, no, I'm not fucking doing that. I'm not getting high. I'm not fighting. I'm not stealing. I'm not lying, even though your mind is insisting you should. And you're not able to just let it go. And it's that sort of obsession that's happening. And that at that point it says, like, crush it if you can. Now, it's one of those instructions where, have you tried that? Have you tried to tell your mind, just shut the fuck up? And your mind says, no, you shut the fuck up. Sure, try to crush me. Good luck. Okay, tonight we are on the 5th factor of the Eightfold Path. Try to do a quick review, people that weren't here. 4 Noble Truths, Eightfold Paths, core of Buddhism. Early, first teaching, found in every tradition. First Noble Truth normalizes the suffering that we experience as human beings. Suffering is normal. Everybody experiences it. It's not your fault. It just comes with birth. You're going to have craving and aversion and grief and sorrow, lamentation and loss. You're going to suffer. If you are alive, you're going to suffer, period. Not all of life is suffering, but there's some suffering in everyone's life. Normal. Second Noble Truth, the cause of suffering, it's not all your fault. You were born into a setup, a system that craves pleasure, that hates pain, a mind that is self-centered, thinks about itself all of the time. And there's a setup in this human incarnation for craving pleasure, hating pain, and suffering about the inability to have pleasant experience all of the time. The inability to be at peace, to be in acceptance. The seeming inability without training, without some practice. Third Noble Truth is that actually it's possible to end suffering. Nirvana, awakening, liberation, at least progress. I can speak from direct experience. I can't speak about enlightenment, but I can speak about, like, when we do this mindfulness and compassion and loving kindness, suffering decreases. We get more freedom. We get more happiness. I don't know about full liberation. Maybe. What I do know for sure, and you all know for yourself, meditation helps. Helps us see more clearly and respond more wisely and suffer less and less. Maybe we can take that all the way to zero suffering nirvana. Find out for yourself about that. The path to this awakening that we're on is the eightfold path. The first two are about wisdom, understanding reality, understanding karma. And really what I'm going to talk about tonight, and so much of this eightfold path hinges on understanding total personal responsibility, karma. I put in my Instagram post today, I said cream with a K, which is a Wu-Tang Clan reference where they say cash rules everything around me. But then I put it in with a K and I said karma rules everything around me. This is the first factor of the eightfold path. Karma rules everything that we experience. We're fully responsible for how we respond to what happens. And our response dictates our happiness or unhappiness. Second is, and more, once we wake up to that and see the personal responsibility, the power that we have, not over what's happening, but how we respond to what's happening. And that how we respond is going to condition our future responses and our future happiness, both our present and future. Second factor is that we have to have intentions that are free from, you have to develop wholesome, wise intentions that will lead to good karma, kindness and compassion and nonviolence and generosity. An intention that is leading in the right direction. My goal is freedom, is happiness. So are my intentional words, my intentional acts, my intentional attitudes in line with the direction that I want to go? Am I coming from non-selfishness, non-fear, non-greed, non-hatred? Intention. Without mindfulness, we're not even so clear about what our intentions are sometimes. Or we think we have good intentions where upon investigation we see that they weren't so good, weren't so skillful. Third factor is about the karma of communication and all of the ways that we are creating karma in our interactions and our communications all day, every day. Last week we talked about the fourth factor around action and renunciation and nonviolence and honesty and avoiding sexual misconduct and not using intoxicants that could lead to heedlessness and cloud our mind and our judgment and our ability to respond wisely. Karma, it's all about karma. So much of this is about understand that if you want to be happy, you can through your own actions, through your own efforts. But that you're going to be responsible for all of it. And tonight is about livelihood. This factor on the path that acknowledges, the Buddha made this choice. He said, I'm just going to be a renunciate. I'm not going to work. I'm not going to touch money. I'm not going to create the karma of livelihood. I'm going to be a mendicant, beggar, homeless person. And I will be supported by the generosity of people who choose to work and choose to support people who dedicate their life to spiritual practice. He said, so that's a good choice. That's a good option. Go be a nun. Go be a monk. Don't have to worry about livelihood at all anymore. Just dedicate your life full time to celibate, meditative, renunciation practice. But in this eightfold path, he said, okay, most of my students, most people that take this on aren't going to take that level of renunciation. So if you're going to engage in livelihood and you understand karma, choose work that's not creating negative karma for you. right livelihood, wise livelihood. And he only mentions traditionally a few different livelihoods to avoid. And there's the kind of mundane, don't kill, don't steal, don't lie, basically the precepts. Like, don't break the precepts at work as well as at home. Now I'm going to come back to some of the traditional livelihood stuff. Right, livelihood. I think it's interesting for us to investigate also our identification with what we do for a living. And I think Los Angeles is a really interesting place where often where you ask people what they do for a living, they'll tell you what they want to do rather than how they actually earn money. So when we're talking about livelihood, we're talking about how you actually earn your living. Lots of musicians, and we ask people, "Oh, I'm a musician." Like, really? You pay the bills? Like, no, I just do that for fun. I work at Whole Foods. And how identified are we with what we do? Oh, I'm an actor, I'm a musician, I'm a producer, Think about how you earn money and how much of your identity is wrapped up in how you earn money. Go around thinking about yourself of, I'm a real estate person, that's who I am. Or I'm a Dharma teacher, that's who I am. Or I'm a actor. I think there's some importance of us seeing that our livelihood is not our identity. Now, for some people, you're doing something that's like your calling. It is, you are an artist and you are making money creating art. And it's easier to be like, no, that's who I am. Like, it's my calling. I'm an artist and I get supported for it. But there's other people who's like, no, I am actually an artist and I don't make any money at it. But I feel much more identified with my creativity than I do with how I pay the bills. I don't know how important this is, but I think that it's part of the investigation of self and identity and... Sure.
How do we use the teachings to remove the craving to identify ourselves with what we want to do or what we think we are? How do we...
First, we just identify it. Right? First, we identify what we're identified with. We bring awareness to it. Oh, okay. My mind is craving for success in this realm, in this area. And then also, why? What do I think it will be like if I was a successful artist, actor, musician, lawyer, doctor, whatever the mind is craving for. And investigating that. Like, okay, what is this story that my mind is telling me that you'll be happy? Because it's always, isn't the story always on some level or another? You'll be happy when? You would be happy if you became successful in this area or in this area or in this area. So that's important to see. Can you identify that in where you're asking the question from?
Well, I guess I was trying to figure out I'm not really what I do for a living.
Yeah.
Even if I am I am X, right? Like, it seems to me what you're teaching, the Buddhist teaching, is that's just an external thing, right? So how do we, whether we're successful or not successful, right? How do we separate our inner, like what we are, from trying to grasp onto that identity of how we walk through the world, right?
I'm not sure exactly how to answer it, but all of the mindfulness helps us wake up to it's not as personal as we've been taking it. All of this. You start to see the impermanent nature, how everything is changing, including the I, me, mine identification. And the more we see that moment to moment in our meditation practice, it loosens our identification with the stories that the mind is telling, the cravings, the identity, meaning-making machine that the mind is. So it happens organically, gradually. I can't more clearly point to the function, but that it's unfolds with your meditation practice over the years. That's what I believe. So some of the things the Buddha said about livelihoods to avoid. If you care about karma, traditional kind of judgmental way that this is translated. When the noble disciple avoiding a wrong way of living gets their livelihood by a right way of living, this is called right livelihood. It is said to practice deceit, treachery. Wrong livelihood is the practice of deceit. So you can think about, is there any parts of your job where you lie? Deceit, and this is an interesting thing in like a bargaining culture. I don't know if it's considered lying when you go to the merchant, when you go to I think in our culture, the biggest thing is like when you're buying a car, they're like, it's $40,000. And you're like, no, it isn't. You're lying to me. You are deceiving me. I checked online and it's only $32,000. But it's like part of the dance. It's the car salesperson's job to do their best to deceive you because they'll make a little bit more profit if they do. They'll make a little, right? And it's the game. Deceit is built into selling cars. And what other, right? And what other livelihoods where you kind of look at, there's some deception here where you're shooting. You'll make more money if you don't tell the truth.
Politicians.
Politics, often in real estate, sometimes lawyers. Insurance sales. So lots of levels of livelihood where there might be some dishonesty, deceit involved. Advertising. Yeah. Yeah, you think about that. If you work in advertising and the core message is this will make you happy. And you're like, oh man, what a lie that is. We all know that this consumerist culture that advertises this false promise of happiness is deceit. Deceit, treachery, soothsaying, trickery, usury, loan. I had to look up usury at one point. I didn't know what it meant. Loaning at high interest rates. Our whole banking industry, wrong livelihood. Of course, it's what's the relative, what is the line? What is an acceptable interest rate? What is like a, skillful interest rate, and what is crossing the line into treacherous usury? This is wrong livelihood. And then in another sutta, 5 trades that should be avoided. Trading in arms. Any sort of arms dealing, weapons dealing. Trading in living beings. So any sort of animal, pet store. Wrong livelihood. Trading in flesh, which this sometimes goes into sex work, sex workers. We'll come back to that. In intoxicating drinks. Now this is tricky. Any waiter that is serving booze, any restaurant, any establishment that is selling intoxicants, not right livelihood. You are making money off of other people's intoxicated delusions, and maybe even have some karma in the poor choices they're going to make once they get intoxicated. If you're making money off of their intoxication. And that's, it's a high, in our culture where alcohol is, just totally accepted and included, and good luck finding even the vegan restaurant that's selling the vegan wine, the organic cocaine. I like to think of the whole, the person who's like, hey, I care about the environment. I care about, I want to go work at this organic grocer. I want to go work at Rainbow Acres or Erewhon or Whole Foods, or, I'm a vegan, environmental, I'm Buddhist. I want to wake up and I work at this health food store. And then actually, if you started to look at the profit margins of these stores, how much of their money is coming from selling booze? Pretty big booze sections in a lot of these places. I don't know, does Erewhon even sell booze? I don't.
No, Whole Foods.
Whole Foods does for sure. That's right. They've jacked the prices so high. They have deceived us. How can there be a $47 peanut butter? Yes.
It's weird because all the clothes too that we wear, but like most of them are made in fucking sweatshops.
Yeah.
It was for human rights, but it's crazy.
Yeah, so part of the context of this also is 2,600 years ago. So there are these sort of general guidelines before factory farming, before whatever it's called, international trade. And the Buddha was on the silk, what's it called? The trade route. The Silk Road, where there was trade, it was coming through Europe and Middle East and through northern India, which is where he lived, and up into China. So there was a sort of trade that was happening. But it's not like now where everything is made by wherever you can make it cheapest and without any thoughts to the harm caused by that kind of profit margin concern. Intoxicating drinks, drugs, of course, and in poison. So poison and weapons. Traditionally, then it says, professions to be avoided include a soldier, a fisherman, a hunter, etc. One of the biggest pushbacks or questions that I tend to get around livelihood is around people in the community that are involved in sex work and prostitution or some level of sex work. And I remember when Against the Stream came out, it was the biggest, kind of the most consistent criticism I got was from women in my community that were strip, dancers or escorts or maybe dominatrixes that were kind of like, hey, I'm a Buddhist and you're telling me that my livelihood isn't wholesome, isn't right livelihood. And I was always kind of like, because these are my people, right? Like this is the Dharma Punx. Like, of course there's sex workers in our community and in recovery. And, that's why we set this thing up, to make it inclusive where people wouldn't be judged. But I always feel like, well, it is my job to say, here's the traditional Buddhist view. Not that I agree with all of the traditional Buddhist view, but it is my job to educate it. In Against the Stream, I say, working in the sex industry as a stripper, prostitute, or purveyor of internet porn is perhaps a more subtle form of wrong livelihood. Sexuality is natural and sex for sale is an ancient profession. But again, we look deeply. It's not hard to see the lust that motivates such an industry has negative effects on both the workers and the customers. At the very least, participation in the sex industry is dependent for profit on lust and attachment, the very causes of suffering and dissatisfaction for people. Spiritual revolutionaries must be committed not to what is easiest, but what is the most beneficial to themselves and to the world. Remember, we have set our intentions to go against the stream. It's not the easiest way, to be sure, but it is perhaps the only way to achieve freedom and bring about positive change. I wrote that 13 years ago. I'm going to talk a little bit about sex work. My sense is 2,600 years ago, when the Buddha is saying something about avoiding the livelihood of sex work, he's talking about slavery. He's talking mostly about the people profiting from women being sold or traded or, into like an indentured sexual slavery. I don't think 2,600 years ago, there was very many women who were saying, I'm going to do that. In that patriarchal, oppressive society where women had very little rights, I don't think it was much choice. I don't think he was addressing what we have now, and I have in my community, which are people who are actually making this choice. They're not being sold into it. It's not all just based on trauma. Actually, there's a feminist perspective on sex work that says, this is a woman's choice if she chooses to do this. And for a man to say it's wrong livelihood, or for anyone to judge it or criticize it, is more upholding of patriarchal, oppressive views. When it comes to right livelihood, my sense is that the Buddha's sentiment was about pimping, not about prostituting. That the trade in flesh, in living beings, in sex worker, was about people making money off of other people's bodies, not so much off of their own. And that if you're making money off of other people's bodies. Now, of course, there's the actual sex work industry. And then somebody said earlier, then there's advertising, where there could be an argument to be made here for the photographer that's mostly pictures of people in bathing suits, right? Which is also sex selling. Or the advertising, which is also selling sexuality, even if there's not a physical component so it depends on what levels we take this to. But my thought about that is, I think the Buddha was mostly addressing pimping. I have a few more thoughts, but what are your thoughts about, does this seem important to you? Again, context, karma. What kind of karma are we creating in making money? Please.
You could say too, like being a therapist, that you're making money off of other people's sorrow and struggles, even though obviously you're motivated to help.
I wouldn't see it that way. I would see that you're making money off of trying to help people end their suffering. Now, if you're a therapist that is unethically keeping clients for decades and kind of keeping them hooked and attached and not helping them in some way, and you're just still charging them. I think that there is actually a therapist's dilemma of, at some point, maybe actually I can't help you anymore. I've done what I can for you, and maybe our relationship is healing. Maybe it's not. And that if you go past that line, then there would be something unethical about continuing to see and charge someone. Sometimes you need to refer them out to someone else that maybe be a better fit. Or really just get them to meditate. Try. So my own feel, I think it rarely would a therapeutic relationship be wrong livelihood. It would be in the right livelihood category generally. Please, Alan.
One of the challenges I have, and I've kind of mentioned this before about what is ethically correct and not.
Yes.
Is in this capitalist society, those with capital have a lot more choices than those who only have their labor to sell on the market.
Yeah.
They have nothing in the bank but their labor, maybe $500. There's a lot of people like that, probably many here.
Yeah.
So if you have a baby and you need to get formula and you don't have the money, is it ethically incorrect to steal some from Whole Foods or CVS so that your baby doesn't go hungry? Is it ethically correct to do something like that for your family because your family's hungry, you steal a loaf of bread? Or to do what you have to do so that your family does not perish or go malnourished. So unless you address the inequality, which is becoming worse and worse in society, those with little capital and those with a lot of capital, right? The deck is stacked for those with capital to make the right ethical choices, right? So how can you really decide what is the right thing or what is the wrong thing, or what is, in this context, right? Either way, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't.
Yeah.
They're very hard choices, right? So to follow, so the Buddha says to do this, so that's what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
Is to me, seems most people will just go, it sounds good, but I can't go that way. Right?
Sure. Yeah. I think that a lot of the karma hopefully comes back to your own direct experience. Rather, fuck what the Buddha says or Buddhism says. But what is your heart? What is your own moral compass? What are your own internalized ethics say? And the more we meditate, the more sensitive we get to that. No matter how much capital we have or don't have.
At least one prone to feel guilty. I mean, this is what religions do. From the Ten Commandments.
But I'm talking about setting that all aside.
And if you teach the teachings, if you hear these teachings and you strive to be a Buddhist, and then you make a decision, and you say, well, it's my own decision. For me,
it's been conditioned.
My experience would be, oh, okay, I feel kind of guilty.
Yeah.
Like you don't want to steal a loaf of bread from Whole Foods or something, but I got a crying baby, I got a family that needs it. So I feel guilty. And then you carry the shame and guilt when really many times your choices are, like I said, damned.
So are you proposing that if somebody was never conditioned with a religious, spiritual view that says stealing, for instance, stealing is wrong, that they would not have any guilt about stealing if that wasn't taught to them by religion?
I think in this situation, really, it's kind of like the idea of revolution. The American Revolution is looked at as a great revolution. They kill people to get a higher level of freedom. So I think people would have an internal. Yeah. I think as society has more and more of the necessary needs for survival, which this one certainly does, of mass production, that when everyone has the ability to have the essence of what they need to survive, there would be naturally less stealing, and that happens in many communities. But when you have no capital and you have a society that you live in with the abundance of Lexus and everything that is thrown in your face, and you're hungry, or your kid's hungry, or you need formula, you need to get health insurance.
Yeah, let's
what I'm saying is,
let's leave it there.
You have to see that, and for me, and kind of turn against it and say, you just can't say it as morality. It's based on every situation and society and your familial system that you live in. You have to find your own road. I don't think you need to. So
I want to stop you because you are grappling with this as you have been for a long time. And you're welcome, continue to grapple with it. what we do here is we discuss Buddhism. You don't agree with all of Buddhism, and that's fine. You're welcome here. Everyone's well. I don't agree with all of it either. But we're going to have this discussion on, okay, here's what the Buddha says. What resonates and what doesn't.
I'm asking you what you think. Is that okay to do that?
But you're not really asking me what I think, Alan. Okay, you're telling me what you think.
Okay, well, let me ask you that.
Yeah.
I'm not striving. I don't think I'm striving on what the teachings are. I think I'm talking about be honestly, the essence of any kind of teaching that says this is the ethical road you should take. Or what would you do, Noah? How do you personally relate to this?
Shouldn't you always have choices? You're not supposed to take what isn't really.
It's hard to say, because I've had a life of, mostly abundance, and I did a lot of lying and stealing and violence, and I went down that road by choice, not by necessity. So you're setting up a hypothetical that I haven't experienced. I haven't experienced having hungry children that I need to steal for. I think that probably all of us put in the right situation would probably kill, would probably steal. I think that, it's quite easy to be like, no, I'm ethical. But if you were put in the right situation, I think we would probably kill and steal and do all of that. But that's a hypothetical that's different than where you're at in your life, where I'm at in my life, where most of us are at in here, which is like, actually, we don't have to steal. Probably, most likely, we're all in this place where rather than going down this hypothetical and using Buddhism as a judgment for, people, just bringing it into your own direct, what's happening for you with your business and your livelihood and your here and now. I think I would probably steal if I needed to. I used to steal and I didn't even need to. But I think that, I think that for sure, if I was put in the right situation, I would care less about my karma and more about survival. And that some of this conversation is a luxurious conversation to have. Jason, please.
I just wanted to kind of shift back to because you made kind of two statements around kind of like sex and sex workers, and you read the piece from your book that was, several years ago, which I agreed with when I read it, both from personal and professional experience. But then also now I'm kind of asking, I guess, that you kind of pointed to it, but then you didn't really. So how has your view or thoughts or understanding shifted from 8 years ago or 13 years ago?
13 years ago, yeah. I feel like the way that comes across and Against the Stream is a bit more critical of people who are choosing to participate in the sex work industry, and not as much as I see it now as the people who are profiting from it from other people's work. I continue to feel like, the pornographers or the pimps are the ones that are really in the wrong livelihood, not necessarily the men and women who are choosing to do that work, if they're choosing to do that work.
So I don't disagree with you. I think that's the beautiful thing about wisdom, is that it's evolving as we deepen our own understanding of things. So then the karma of people who are engaging in certain behaviors, let's say drinking alcohol, right? The karma of drinking alcohol is on that person, but yet the manufacturers of Budweiser or Crown, Jack Daniels or whoever, there seems to be a little disparity between, like you were talking about, the manufacturers or the heads or the people that are profiting off of it, and not so much about the person who is consuming.
Well, the Buddha addresses this in action. He says, hey, if you want to wake up, don't consume. And if you care about your karma, don't profit off of other people's consumption. right? So he's addressing it on both levels. Like we have our own personal choice, renunciation, if we care about this. And then if you're somebody who also cares about it, but happens to be in an industry that's maybe creating some profiting from something that's maybe creating some negative karma for you, consider a different course of livelihood. Consider making your money in a way that's not causing harm to others. Please.
The word that comes to mind about anything to do with any of those industries.
Yeah. Sex, drugs, and rock and roll.
Would be exploitive.
Yeah.
Anything exploitive.
Yeah.
To me would seem to be the context of which wouldn't gain you any favor of enlightenment.
Yep.
And we all know what exploitive is. So it's very
Although perception, I think we would all have some pretty different perspectives on what is exploitation and what isn't.
not exploitive, when it's an exchange.
Right. Thank you. Soma, I'm going to give you the last word.
Yeah, I'm going to put my voice in the room on this one because I am a sex worker. I'm a dominatrix and have been for 15 years and a Buddhist. And it's something I've had to look at very carefully as far as livelihood. And I think one of the more important things to say about right livelihood in regards to sex work is it's actually none of anyone's business unless they are a sex worker.
Mm-hmm.
So we like to talk about it.
Other people, yeah.
There's charge around it. It's sexy. It's a sexy topic, but the path is our own. And just as we don't tell people what to do with their diet in regard to not killing, not harming, then it is not our place to speak on livelihood for other people. It is for us each to find our own way. I would say in regard to sex work, though, everyone in this room has at some point looked at porn and probably jerked off to porn. And the question is, did you pay for it? Was it freely given? Have you supported your local porn stars? Do you know anything about a sex worker? It is one of the more marginalized communities in the world. So rather than judging about whether it's right livelihood, maybe looking at compassion. And that's it. That's what I gotta say.
I appreciate it. And I want to echo what Samma's saying, because this is really the spirit of all of the Dharma. It's for you to look at your own life, not for you to look and judge everyone else's lives. For us to say, like, okay, the Buddha said, here's a map. And then you look at it and say, where am I on this map? How's my karma? How do I feel about my actions, about my speech, about my livelihood? And if there's some things on there that the Buddha said, hey, you shouldn't be a waiter, be like, shit. But I feel pretty good about being a waiter. Or you shouldn't be a sex worker, but shit, I feel okay about being a sex worker. Like, it's for you to look at yourself and not to put on other people. And, it's one of the ways that we cause a lot of harm to each other by judging and by separating and by not letting everyone feel included and welcome, and this sort of moralistic hierarchy that gets created on who's behaving correctly and who's the best Buddhist, the most Buddhist. I had a teacher that I used to respect so much for years, a teacher that had been, decades a teacher to me, say to me that anybody involved in kinky sex shouldn't be a Buddhist teacher. And it just like blew my mind that he was holding that small-minded view of human sexuality and this sort of religious, puritanical view of what is and isn't skillful and wholesome and acceptable if you're spiritual, like spiritually if you're a meditation teacher, and putting that out onto each other rather than this view of like, in 12-step recovery, we say, take your own fucking inventory. Check out yourself. Quit putting it on everybody else. And I like that. I like that spirit. Okay, Alan, last word.
This is a suggestion.
Yes.
This seems to be a particularly fertile ground. Rather than leaping on to the next vehicle path this week, we continue to explore this.
All of livelihood, or just want to talk about sex? Perhaps. Yeah, there's a lot here to unpack around money, and because then the next part is not only how do you earn money, but how do you spend money? And Samma pointed to it, like, have you spent money on pornography, on sex, like, not only how are we earning, but what industries are we supporting when we shop at usury health food stores? We'll leave it there for tonight. I put up a flyer about the October retreat. Check it out, register. It will fill up, especially if you want a single room. Register early so you get a single room. And come sit with on Wednesday night. Wednesday night's been quiet and slow, although we did have a treatment center show up the other week that had no idea we did a 45-minute silent sit. You had all these poor folks in detox trying to sit there for 45 minutes. So a lot of them did bail. So come sit with us on Wednesdays. And Thursday night, Alan is continuing his class this week. Next week, Alan and I are going to do Alan Clements are going to do a dialogue next Thursday, the 22nd. Please come and this is going to be like a Dharma battle. It's not really going to be a battle, but it's going to be really interesting. And he's going to ask me a whole bunch of questions I don't want to answer on camera in front of everybody. And it should be actually quite interesting. 7:30 on Thursday, the 22nd, and we'll live stream it and all of that stuff.
On pay-per-view.
We're going to advertise it. Actually, he asked me to make a Facebook. I'm advertising it right now.
Yeah, right.
That's not right.
It's not deceptive.
It might not be advertising. That's right. So come on the 22nd. Maybe I'll make a flyer, Monica. Maybe we'll make a Facebook post, Monica. But think about it and come on the 22nd. And that's it. May any goodness that comes from our practice be shared outward in all directions with all beings in all forms of right and wrong livelihood. May each one of us come to awakening, heal what we can heal, help who we can help. And together may we create a positive change on this planet.